Hiya, I'm Anna Powell-Smith. I'm the founder of the new organisation, the Centre for Public Data. Paul's very kindly asked me to talk about it. Paul, can I share my screen?
Yes, please do. I will stop sharing.
Okay, bear with me. Okay, share. Can you see my screen now?
We can see your screen, and I will now go on mute.
Amazing. Right, so our mission is, I'll just say I'm a data scientist by background. I spent the last 3 years working at a startup called Flourish, which does data visualization software. Before that, I was the founding technical lead at the evidence-based data lab with Ben Goldacre. So I've been using data a lot and thinking about data a lot, and that's where this comes from, really. So we are the Centre for Public Data. Our mission is better UK public data via legislation. We have a practical focus, and our two goals are better public data by legislation, which I'll talk about today, and then working to fill gaps in public data. And obviously there's a million ways you could make public data better, and it's an enormous, probably the most important public policy topic there is. We're focusing on a very specific legislative focus. So as everybody here, I don't need to tell you, you know there's a problem with public data. We know that MPs and ministers can't find things out that they need to know about their own policies. You know, we're hearing from people in government. We spent, millions on broadband expansion, and we don't know where the money's gone, if it's worked. The National Audit Office last year wrote a report, Challenges in Data Across Government, which identified a whole series of failures caused by data problems. And obviously COVID's brought lots of data shortcomings into the spotlight, and the kind of work that Tom and people have been doing is highlighting some of those problems. What's interesting at the moment is there is interest from central government in fixing some of this. So we're getting Michael Gove making speeches, talking about publishing more data, which is great, and really, really engaging with it. Quick case study on the kind of problems we've seen and where legislation fits in. So universal credit, the biggest reform to welfare in a generation. So big you can see it from space, was the official tagline. The Welfare Reform Act 2012, which is enormously long, and the Universal Credit Regulations 2013, which follow, redesign the system, from the ground up. But they say nothing at all about reporting what's going on. There's no mandate to do that. There's no requirement to do that. We started out with quite good sort of aims on publishing data. But what we got was not that, and adequate data was not collected and published on what was going on. And you had campaigners saying, we're seeing people on the ground really struggling, not being paid, having to go to food banks. And unfortunately, the government could kind of dismiss that and say it's not evidence, it's anecdote. And the Work and Pensions Committee started asking questions like, how many people are being paid late? How late are they being paid? What's the impact it's having on them? We know that Job Centre referring people to food banks. Are you counting that? Are you counting people being made homeless? And the committee couldn't get answers to its questions. And if you read the transcripts, they're quite scathing about the lack of data that's being collected. And also, the NEO again reported we wouldn't know how much it would cost and whether it actually saved money. So this was a kind of a government failure to collect and publish data on its own policies, which had enormous harm. So our theory of change is that the causes of this problem are institutional and technical. And they both come down to data is not a primary part of policy making. It tends to be something that's thought about afterwards. And because it's not there right at the beginning in the legislation, there's no mandate to do it. And so institutionally, it's, other things compete for priority. It's not always a top priority. It's kind of left to analysts to think about. Start out with the best will in the world, but everyone knows that life's busy and full of priorities. And also technically, if you're not thinking about data right at the start when you're building the system, you may not collect what you need. It may be that the system's owned by a third party if it's outsourced and they own the data. You've got to think about it right from the beginning. So our approach is try and work with legislators to say, as you're putting an act through Parliament, it'd be really great to have some provisions in there about, just publishing the right kind of data and asking civil servants to do that. And what we don't want to do, obviously, is kind of be really prescriptive and say, you've got to collect exactly this, because that would be too inflexible, but just make sure it's in there from the start. And there are areas of legislation where this is really good at the moment. So a lot of environmental legislation is very strong on data, as I'm sure people here know. Air quality data is great. Yeah, a lot of environmental data is really, really strong and has had lots of impact. And other areas are kind of weaker. But the ultimate aim is just to end the era of data as a sort of afterthought, and relying on ministerial powers, which, I think, as we've seen, haven't always been enough. So our current area of focus is the Agriculture Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment. And this bill reforms the funding system for farmers. It's really good. Environmental groups are really happy. So farmers are going to stop being paid for the area of land they own, and they're going to start being paid for the environmental goods they deliver. So it's going to fund things like soil quality, wildlife, public access to the countryside, deliverable outcomes. Unfortunately, one thing the bill does is it removes the current provisions about publishing data on what's happening, and it makes them optional. And then in terms of the secondary legislation, which defines what may be published, it's not brilliant. It doesn't have any mention of geospatial data, which is really, really crucial for this. And it's not great about beneficiary data. It's actually weaker than it is at present. And this is a real shame, because if you had good geospatial data on where this billions of pounds of money was going and what it was being used for, you could imagine not only that then kind of being combined with satellite data to say, is it working? You can imagine a whole kind of ecosystem of companies working with farmers to say, we can help you deliver what you need to do and monitor it and see if it's working. So it's really, really it's really important data. So we're trying to work with interest groups and legislators just to say, look, got to start thinking about this. So that's our first area of focus. We've been looking at the 1.1 million words of upcoming legislation. This is the current bill size by word count. And we're trying to pick which other bills to look at, because there's loads. So here are some of the things we're thinking about. And if anybody here has particular kind of interest in any of these areas, it'd be great to chat. What's interesting is that there's 3 bills that establish new regulators. So the Building Safety Bill, which is a post-Grenfell bill, sets a new regulator. The Online Harms Bill about regulating Facebook and Twitter. The Environment Bill, they're all establishing new UK regulators who will have the power to use data to kind of, police these companies a little bit. And thinking about how data operates in that is going to be super important. There's also a renters reform bill coming up about the rental system. There's a rail white paper. There's a couple of white papers later this year about levelling up and the internal market, in which data is going to be super important. So again, if anyone has kind of expertise or interest in those, it'd be great to chat. And we're brand new. We've got funding from the Joseph Rantry Reform Trust. Our goal is to work collaboratively with organisations who can use this data to make sure it's useful, and we're just keen to talk to as many people as possible about the things that are happening and what they might like to see, and legislators who are interested in making legislation fit for the 21st century. So that's it, really. Thank you. Yeah, that's it.